Hi everyone, my name is Inge Urbancic and I am a PhD student in international education at George Mason University in Fairfax. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the results of my pilot study. And the presentation is titled Exploring Intercultural Competence and Global Citizenship Within the Pakistani Classroom.
So by way of introduction to this study, I just wanted to let you know that the study itself aims to explore different perspectives of intercultural competence by Pakistani English secondary school teachers. So as you may know, Pakistan is implementing a single national curriculum with student outcomes of global citizenship, which include things like the development of empathy, of tolerance, gender equity, as well as a promotion of diversity of cultures. So through a qualitative research study approach, 3 Pakistani English teachers were interviewed to explore their perspectives of the term intercultural competence. And this study itself is relevant to explore intercultural competence as a framework to effectively support these new curricular outcomes within the single national curriculum. And in addition, this study adds to the field of international research by providing a foundation for the development of purposeful teacher education programs through the framework of intercultural competence. And it will help to identify the intersections in terminology as well as include a broader understanding of non-Western perspectives on intercultural competence. It's important to take a look and see exactly what I'm talking about when I'm referring to global citizenship and intercultural competence. So for the purpose of this study, I'm looking at global citizenship as someone who has developed an awareness of global issues, such as they are environmentally conscious, there's human rights awareness, sustainable development, and gender issues. Comparing that with intercultural competence, this is referring to the critical knowledge and the skills and the behavior that enables people to manage and interpret cultural interactions in a positive way. So the main difference between global citizens and interculturally competent citizens are the behavioral adaptations that is included in the source of the definition. Keeping these definitions in mind, and specifically the idea of global citizenship, we're going to turn to Pakistan's single national curriculum so that we can see exactly what is happening in response to the growing need for transformative approaches to globalization within the Pakistani education system. So in 2018, Imran Khan had proposed comprehensive educational reforms to the Pakistani educational system through the development of a single national curriculum. And within this curriculum, there are stated global citizenship outcomes for all primary and secondary school students by the year 2030. Some of the outcomes that are included within the curriculum are the development of fostering a sense of inclusiveness, peace, social cohesion, as well as attributes of tolerance, respect, equality, and gender equity. There's also notable behavioral outcomes such as open-mindedness, flexibility, and adaptation to intercultural interactions. And there are also the development of ethical and social values relevant to living within a multicultural and civilized society. There are other stated global citizenship outcomes which we are finding within the single national curriculum within each subject area. All of them from general knowledge, early childhood, English, Urdu, Islamiyat, mathematics, general science, and social studies. So finally, just to wrap up the rationale for the study, if we look at the definition of intercultural competence and we look at what's happening within Pakistan's single national curriculum, we can see that intercultural competence includes the behavioral modifications that are needed to create the meaningful positive interactions that between diverse cultures and societies. So because of that, I'm looking to explore the perspectives of intercultural competence within Pakistan, specifically by Pakistani English teachers, to explore these as a starting point to investigate ways to develop actionable and implementable behaviors of the stated global citizenship outcomes within Pakistan's single national curriculum. So if we turn now to the participants and exactly how they were selected for the study, I used what's called a purposeful sampling method. And using this method, I selected three English teachers, three Pakistani English teachers, to participate in the study. And each teacher was assigned a pseudonym to allow for their own anonymity, as well as each one has also consented to be recorded and participate in the study. So each of the three participants had participated in a 6-week educational program here in the United States, and they were selected due to their high level of interest and engagement in the advancement of education through global and international activities that they are participating in. Each one of the participants also has a common interest to connect Pakistan globally in the world, and I could see through these interviews that their interest and enthusiasm was very, very apparent. Also, since I had previously worked with this group of teachers, the teachers are aware of my interest and my involvement in Pakistan. However, the interviews were conducted professionally, and they did adhere to peer-reviewed as well as critiqued interview questions. So because of restrictions due to COVID, this study did occur online via Zoom calls, and all of the interviews occurred in October of 2021 using a qualitative research approach. And once the data was collected, I analyzed the data for patterns and emergent themes through a process that is called inductive coding. So the overarching research question in the study explored the general perspectives of the term itself of intercultural competence by Pakistani English teachers. So this really turned out to be theme 1. And as we look at these, some of the thoughts are expressed here, such as intercultural competence is a strong bond between human beings. Intercultural competence is a way to break borders and tolerate others and to listen with patience, accept them and their notions. Intercultural competence tells us that something beyond religion exists, that is human nature. Or intercultural competence is accepting the differences, accepting diversity and adapting per the needs of the environment and the needs of the culture. Or intercultural competence is a way that you can share your culture with others, you can adopt what I have, and it's a bond of relationship, a bond of love, and a bond of respect. As the interviews progressed, we saw some more clear themes and challenges really that emerged regarding intercultural competence in Pakistan. So in regards to the second theme, the overarching theme, really was a growing need for intercultural competence in Pakistan. One of the participants stated that this is the need of the hour, and he continued his description of this need of intercultural competence in Pakistan from an environmental perspective, saying that competencies are very much necessary because wherever we go, there are man-made boundaries. But the problem of the world, the problem of people, the pains of the people are saying that intercultural competency is very much needed. They say that we are connected to everyone, so now nobody can survive in isolation. And knowing only about yourself and your culture and religion is not enough. Another participant noted that it is as important as oxygen to survive. There were as well some noted challenges to implementation in Pakistan, and the teachers noted that this is not a primary focus anywhere in Pakistan. Also citing that the textbook content is not updated and that there are a lack of amenities in the classrooms in order to develop and promote intercultural competence. One of the questions that I asked was a very open-ended question regarding how each of the teachers, if they were given unlimited resources, how would they implement intercultural competence in their classroom? And this is where really the third theme started to evolve, which was just talking about integrating intercultural competence in the Pakistani classroom. And the first participant was discussing the importance of accessibility and cultural connections between the teachers, saying that if we get a chance to have an interaction, student to student, or an interaction teacher to teacher, it would be helpful to come to know about each other's domain. Another participant noted that, the world has become a global village and intercultural competency learning has become an indispensable leader of our time. And we have to accept that in this 21st century, it is essential for us. Education for teachers, we need to teach our students what intercultural competence is. Another mentioned that it is important to teach our students intercultural competence. We need to bring something new into the classroom. We need to be proactive. We need to be interested, dedicated, and intercultural competency can be integrated. Also, coming in from a different perspective, we can see a teacher had noted integrating it in the classroom would be about raising flags and arranging some common books and some slang words. And it's important to understand that Pakistan is very, very culturally diverse on its own. So first, we have to look into the diversity that is existing in our own culture and our own country. First, start with what we know. So as we look at a discussion and really a conclusion of this study and the results that were here, we can see that based upon the scope of this pilot study, as well as the exploration of the research question and the series of interviews, we can see that the responses that were received were quite rich and insightful regarding the perspectives of intercultural competence by Pakistani teachers. And upon analysis of the data, the perspectives of intercultural competence by Pakistani teachers share these teacher perspectives in several key areas. Specifically, that there is a huge need for intercultural competence specifically within Pakistani Urdu medium government secondary schools. Also that there are key variations on the perspectives of intercultural competence itself and the meaning of what this term means by the teachers who were interviewed. We also see that there is a clear lack of availability of professional teacher development programs within the field of intercultural competence in Pakistan. And we explored or investigated the role of cultural exchange as a positive way to develop intercultural competence. So what we're seeing is that truly there is an opportunity for greater exploration and study not only into the terminology itself of global citizenship and intercultural competence, but also an understanding of the framework or a framework that could be used to support the development of global citizenship student outcomes within the Pakistan's single national curriculum.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I'm Safia Ibrahim Mohammed Elgasim, Associate Professor, University of Gezira, Sudan. First of all, I thank you for this chance. On behalf of my colleague Rihab Elsharif, I will present this study concerning advanced education in Muslim societies, analytical study of Sudan data. The International Institute of Islamic Thought advocates the project of advancing education in Muslim societies. It is a reformative method for problem encounter Muslim societies. This initiative was based on the belief on the centrality of the education in Islam, and it is important in achieving the holistic development that resulted in psychological and social stability as well as economic welfare. Based on this idea, the International Institution of Thought, of Islamic Thought, undertake this survey that cover 15 Muslim countries, including Sudan. This study is mainly concerned with the analysis of Sudan data. Concerning the queries of the study, the objective of this study is concerned with answering the following question. Number one, what are the importance of the values and concepts involved in this survey for advancing the education in Sudan? The second question is that, is there any variation in the trend towards the forgiveness, empathy, collectivistic versus individualistic orientation and problem solving among different gender and age group, Sudanese school teachers and school students? Thirdly, the study is concerned with answering the question concerning whether the scientific and reasonable recommendations that can be provided for improving the education process in Sudan and thus provide a transformative education. Concerning the literature review, this study is concentrated in two parts. Number one, the study defines the basic concepts related to the concept of education and the concept of value and the interdependent relation between these two concepts, education and value. The second part of literature review is concerned with education in Sudan, giving some historical background about the education in Sudan, besides the reformative experience of the Sudan concerning education. The method of analysis adopted in this study involve, first of all, the study or this report is concerned mainly with analysis of this survey for Sudan data. Sample size of this sample is 9 participants, representing 5% of the total sample. Of the overall survey that cover 15 countries. The mean sample size of 140. The participants involved 4 distinct groups: school student, school teacher, university student, and university instructors. Sample size was distributed among these different groups as the following table show. As far as the distribution of sample by survey type, school students represent the majority of the sample size. It worth mentioning that the recent study would focus on the analysis of the data concerning the two types, i.e. school student and school teacher, for different reasons presented in the research. For the purpose of the analysis, the study tends to combine between different methods due to the nature of the survey data. To describe the demographic characteristic of participants, we use descriptive statistics and frequency tables. Moreover, the study adopted different statistical measures such as chi-square, t-test, as well as Likert scale. With regard to the data analysis and interpretation, we have demographic features of the sample figure, the distribution of respondents by age, and distribution by religions, as well as distribution of the respondents by home language. Concerning the distribution of the participants by religions and the common language or common home language, it worth mentioning that these two, i.e. religions and Arabic language, compose or represent the important cultural component expect to produce peaceful and stable community. Unfortunately, this is not the state. And Sudan, like many other Islamic communities, suffer from so many problems. This matter may attribute it to the domination of societal traditions and customs. Most of these traditions are not conductive one. Thus, for Islamic belief to become the motivated agent of individuals' behavior and practices, government policies and plans have to direct its effort towards a type of education reforms that able to transform this state of affairs, i.e. to focus on value education. Concerning the respondents' distribution by their current relationship status, this figure shows that the percentage of married living together represent the highest percent, i.e. 64%. As far as the distribution of respondents by number of children, and in spite of the decreasing trends towards the high family size, it was still, i.e. the high family size or large family size is still evaluated among rural residents as source of social status for their mothers and for their economic benefit for their fathers, whom represent the major family breadwinners. Concerning the school teacher distribution by their level of education completed, figure 7 shows that the bachelor's degree represents the highest degree for 76% of the school teachers. Finally, we analyze some selected scale variable across different demographic features, mainly gender, age group, as well as the targeted group, including school students and school teachers. Scale variables means by gender reveals that the forgiveness value takes the least mean, while empathy scale is the highest one. Regarding gender variation, this result indicates that there is different attitude towards the 4 scale variable in favor of male. As far as the scale variables distributions by age group, the figure shows that the least mean value among different age group is that of forgiveness value. The scale mean value by data source explains that there is some variation between the two groups with regard to empathy in favor to school students. In contrast to the result of figure 8 and figure 5 above, embassy have the least value. Concerning findings and conclusion, first of all, we present the demographic result. This result shows that female sample is more than that of male. This reflects the increasing rate of female education due to positive societal trend, in addition to the male dropout. Secondly, young age group represent the majority of the survey sample. This state is consistent with Sudan 2020 population pyramid. Religious and language distribution result explains that Sudan is predominantly Islamic community, where Arabic language, i.e. where Arabic is the main home language for 98% of the Sudanese people. As far as the scale variable across gender, age group, and data source, i.e. school students and school teachers, the result of scale variables across gender reveals that forgiveness value takes the least mean, while empathy scale is the highest one. And there is different attitude towards 4 scale variable in favor of female. The forgiveness value have the least mean among different age group. This is consistent with table 8 result. Moreover, the elders have the highest forgiveness value. CAIO trend tend to be high, tend to have the highest mean value, followed by empathy scale. However, there is some variation between the two groups, school student and school teacher, with regard to empathy in favor to school student. In contrast to the result of table 8 and 9, empathy have the least value. Thank you for you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ahmed Atef. I'm a graduate of George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, in the field of international education and educational leadership. The title of my presentation is Thinking About Peace Education in the Republic of Yemen, or shortly in Yemen, as everybody knows, a country that's located in the Arab Peninsula, and a country that's been experiencing war for almost eight years now. The purpose of this study was to explore the perceptions and experiences of the faculty members of education in 4 universities in Yemen, in different parts of Yemen, actually. 2 of them are located in the north part of the country, and the other 2 are in the south. And these universities are Aden University, Ta'az University. Aden University is in the south, Ta'az University is in the middle, Hodeidah University is in the west, and Hadramaut University in the east of the country. The conducted in-person interviews with the faculty members in these 4 universities were aimed at understanding their thinking about peace education, its implementation, and also the training of the pre-service teachers in primary and secondary schools to teach values of peace, tolerance, and acceptance of others. This is the first study of its kind, actually, that takes place in these 4 universities in Yemen, where the focus is to highlight the issue of peace in that country, and also to prepare or find ways to prepare educators for the post-war transition in the country. Since 2015, as everybody knows, the Republic of Yemen has been subjected to a devastating war that has been plagued the people in both of the north and south of Yemen. And we've been seeing humanitarian tragedies. And the most people who are affected by the war are children, and the United Nations are trying its best to bring everybody to the negotiating table, and the government of the United States as well is doing its best through the special envoy, Mr. Tim Linder King, to convince everybody to come into the table. The UN envoy, Mr. Hans Grunberg, has been in position for about a year now, and he has been very active in convincing everyone to come to peace and talk about peace in the country. Nevertheless, the war continues. The significance of this study is the timing that it comes in. It's really in a time where everybody is getting tired of the war, but everybody in the country is in need of the regional as well as the international support to convince them to negotiate a peaceful settlement for the crisis. And coming back to this study, so it's a qualitative case study, and it began in the summer of last year. And there are 21 participants in this study from the faculty members of those 4 universities, in addition to 5 coordinators who have been appointed by the principal investigator of this study, which is me, to help with access to different universities and with recruiting the participants to give the interview for the study. The literature is really full of different perspectives and different visions on how peace education can be carried out. There are, for example, writings by Ian Harris and others. So, for example, Ian Harris, 2014, provided a concise history of peace education practices that go back to centuries as mean to resolve conflicts peacefully. Harris mentioned that efforts of many early indigenous tribes, including in African tribes as well, long time in history, have been successful in establishing kind of mechanism to resolve their conflicts. In addition to the religious teachings that also helps in promoting peace. He also mentioned that the religions, all 5 religions and others as well, played a role in the consciousness of the people to establish peace. And for example, he mentioned in page 11 of his article that the central purpose of Islam is the promotion of peace and fellowship in the world and the development of understanding among different races, religions, and tribes. Yemen is a Muslim country, and we'll come back when the participants were interviewed. So many of them have mentioned the role of Islam, the role of religion in helping the process of peace and harmony in the society. In the 19th century, many peace movements organized in several European societies, and their roles were strengthened during the World War I and World War II. Throughout modern history, women in particular played a critical role in advocating for peace and educating the new generation the values of necessity of peace to solve differences and avoid wars. So we can mention among the prominent peace and human rights advocates were the Austrian Bertha von Suttner, born 1843 and died in 1914, the American Jane Addams, 1860 to 1938, the American Sojourner Truth who born in 1797 and died in 1883, so a long time ago. And also the Italian Mary Montessori, 1872-1952. Their contributions well documented in the literature as being advocates for peace and peace education as well. The UN Charter, on the other side, defined the role of the United Nations as a driver for peace and cooperation among nations. Since its foundation in 1945, the United Nations focused on a variety of projects related to world peace and well-being, such as, for example, the Associated School Project in 1953, which was meant to study disarmament, the international economic order, and human rights in schools throughout the world. UNESCO, as specialized body of the United Nations, this is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, has a lot of contribution to peace education, and it adopted in London on November 1945, actually November 16, 1945, adopted its constitution. And in the constitution, it was spelled very clearly that UNESCO contributes to peace and security by promoting collaboration among the nations through education, science, and culture in order to further universal respect for justice, for the rule of law, and for the human rights and fundamental freedoms. The severe impact of the ongoing war in Yemen can be easily felt in the fields of education and health services. According to Zaham, Babalati, and Lashwal in 2020, health and education have been among the hardest hit sectors. The failure to take immediate actions to rebuild these sectors threatens the future of the country and the next generations. That was in page 1114 in the reference, the lesson. Peace education and culture of peace. There are two terms that go hand in hand in many of the literatures. So what is meant by peace education first is that I can refer here to Harris 2014. He defined peace education as the process of teaching people about the threats of violence and strategies for peace. UNESCO has expanded on the definition of peace education by putting forward what is known today as the framework of culture of peace. The United Nations in general has accepted the contributions of UNESCO in that field, and also in its General Assembly Resolution 53/25 on November 19, 1998, states that the culture of peace consists of values, attitudes, and behaviors that reflect and inspire social interaction and sharing based on principle of freedom, justice, and democracy, all human rights, tolerance, and solidarity, that reject violence and endeavor to prevent conflicts by tackling their root causes to solve problems through dialogue and negotiation, and that guarantee the full exercise of such values. Peace education does not mean to teach people the skills of resolving conflicts and avoiding violence only, but also entails creating a transformative culture among individuals and organizations to uphold the values of peace, cooperation, and coexistence as being basic elements of their everyday culture. The method I used for this study was interpretive case study, qualitative research in the 4 universities, focused on purposeful selection of the participants, because I was looking for people who are knowledgeable enough to contribute to the purpose of the study and to answer the research questions. And there were 3 research questions put for this study. The first research question was how educators in colleges of education perceive peace education, tolerance, and accepting others. The second question was how current conflict impact education and what can educators do to support peace. And the third question was what are the elements of peace education, training, programs, and curricula that can be suggested in Yemen. The study design utilized, as I said, the interpretive method in qualitative research. And in this method, the researcher interviews the participants and explore in depth their perspectives and the meanings they make regarding the research questions. Participants' individual experiences, perceptions, thoughts, and constructed meanings occupy a prominent status in the final findings of this study. The participants' perceptions and thinking about peace education in a country at war as Yemen reflect the commonality of the group thinking regarding the reality of education in that country. Choosing 4 sites, north, south, east, and west, would add to the value of the perceptions and the contributions of the participants because they'll be having various perspectives according to what is happening in their own universities and own regions. And as Baton 2015 said or confirmed, that exploring various perceptions and thinking of participants regarding the study questions is a common approach for interpretive inquiry. Research sites and selections are within the design, as I explained earlier. And participants have been both gender. Out of the 21, I had 5 male coordinators, and then I have 6 female faculty members from different universities, the 4 universities, and the remaining were male faculty members. The findings of this study indicate that the need, actually there are so many perceptions that I was really be able to enlist and show as an evidence of the different thinking on how peace education in Yemen can be implemented and how people are thinking about peace in general. But the finding of this study has 3 parts. The need to define the outcomes of peace education on individual and community levels. Second, the role of teachers to support it. And third, the required elements for peace education training and curriculum that could be suggested as a follow-up step to this research. This is in brief about the study. Thank you very much for your listening and for being patient with me. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Noor, and I'm excited to be presenting at this symposium today. I'm going to go right ahead and share my screen, and then we'll get going. All right. So the topic of my presentation is making space and finding voice for the narrative of Muslim American youth. And I look at the educational journeys, both formal and informal, of female Muslim American high school seniors. I was intrigued by this problem statement because of increased racialization around the country after the 2016 election. We really saw an increase in institutionalized repression, an increase in Islamophobic rhetoric, and then really probe areas of a hyphenated identity that comes with being Muslim American. And in doing that, create a space for the counter stories of these students. I use critical race theory as my framework because it explores these very areas and creates a space for the creation of counter narratives. My research question was, what are the lived experiences of Muslim American high school seniors in their formal and informal educational journeys? One thing that was really important and that also ties into autoethnography is my own positionality in this study. As part of my personal journey, I was born and raised in Pakistan, where of course I was part of a majority population being Muslim. However, I was very privileged to have gone to a school and received an education where I was, where the mode of instruction was English, so much so that we were taught to even think in English. That kind of puts you in this elitist group in Pakistan itself. Moving on from there, I lived in Malaysia for some years and have been in the United States for several years now. In the United States, of course, the experience was the polar opposite, where I became the marginalized minority population and lost that place of privilege that I grew up being very used to. In my professional journey, I have taught at Muslim schools across North America for the last 15 years. And in each one of the schools that I taught, what I really tried to do was engage with the students on how they perceive their identity to be. And one thing that was really pivotal in my professional work that led to this study that I conducted was over a series of 5 years. I asked our 8th grade students, all of whom were born after 9/11, how they felt about 9/11. And what was really insightful was that every year, every student that I asked, 98% of my total response was that these students felt guilty for 9/11. And this is, it's very surprising because they were all born after 9/11. However, they carry the guilt of association when they are born in this country as being Muslim American. Another thing that's insightful is my educational journey that led to the study itself. When I was doing my doctorate, in the first 4 courses that I took, when I was asked to introduce myself, I would evade the conversation of where I was originally from. And when I spoke about my professional experience, I would always say, I work at a faith-based school in Massachusetts. It was only in my 4th class, which was on social justice and education, that I realized what I was subconsciously doing over there. What I was really doing was making myself relevant to the mainstream experience and considering my own experience to be invalid to the large population. So when I said I work at a faith-based school, what I was really trying to do is reach out to a more generic definition of myself, because I considered my own experiences as an educator of a Muslim school to be very specific, to be very narrow, and to be irrelevant to the larger mainstream. And that's what got me thinking. I was like, look at this. I'm like a 30+ person. I'm in a doctorate program. Everybody over here has, of course, reached that kind of level of education where they can engage in this conversation, yet I'm choosing to invalidate my own experiences. So if this is something I'm doing as an adult, what is it that Muslim youth are going through in the same areas when they're so young and when they're thrown into these realms of hyphenation? So I went ahead and looked closely at critical race theory. I looked at the spectrum of educational experiences that these students go through. I looked at representation of these students in curriculum and what they felt about that, and also looked at the extracurricular activities that these students might have been engaged in. And we really found that in a regular American high schooler gets exposure at the max to 2 Muslim protagonists in their entire high school career. And those 2 Muslim protagonists that they have exposure to are most probably the protagonists of I Am Malala and Khalid Hosseini's Kite Runner. And this is problematic because in both of those stories, the Muslim character that is portrayed, the Muslim protagonist, is not an American and is in fact a person who belongs to Islam in a far-flung country away from the United States. So really embedding this whole narrative that Islam belongs elsewhere, that faith and people who practice that faith belong elsewhere. And the protagonist of both of these stories are people who fight against mainstream norm, which is oppressive in both of those texts. So there is oppression happening in Pakistan, and Malala stands out against it. And there is oppression happening in Afghanistan, and the central character of Kite Runner fights against it. So really normalizing the barbaric, oppressive, stereotypical descriptions of Muslims and how the protagonist sticks out because they do something that's against it. Again, these texts don't resonate with Muslim American students, yet that's what they're exposed to over here. I also looked at issues of identity. Muslim American students experience multiplicities of identity, and there's a great deal of intersectionality that happens over there with them being Muslim or female, male, what type of Muslim, what type of ethnicity they belong to, etc. And of course, there is a lot of impact that Islamophobia has on this identity navigation that these students go through. It is sad that anytime there is an act of oppression that is carried out in this country or elsewhere, like some psycho shooter, goes on, shoots, guns down a lot of people, the first thing that comes into the mind of Muslim American youth is, oh, please don't let the perpetrator be a Muslim. So the first thought that comes into the minds of Muslim youth is not how many people passed away or what happened or what were the, what were the details, but rather let not the perpetrator be Muslim, because that means we are going to be further demonized and criminalized for being Muslim American. Another third aspect that I looked at was acculturation and the degrees of assimilation, integration, or marginalization that these students feel. It is rather ironic that Muslim American youth, but true, Muslim American youth will always feel not American enough in the mainstream just because they carry a Muslim name, let alone be recognizable for being Muslim. And within the Muslim community, they will most often not be considered Muslim enough. They're too American. And this kind of dichotomy that exists or that is created between their identities is problematic. And add on to that double consciousness where the students are always perceiving themselves as how they are being perceived or being othered in their communities. I use critical race theory not only as my framework but also as my methodology because it has the space for counter narratives and fights against a white washing or white sabotaging of the narratives of marginalized people. So what I really wanted to do here was to have my participants tell their own stories. Now I had 4 participants in the stories because it was a narrative study, and these 4 participants, all of them happened to be girls, and they were all high school seniors, and they had, interestingly, all had elementary and middle school experience in Muslim schools in America. And then 2 of them had gone on to public high school and 2 of them had continued on to a Muslim high school. But let's take a look at these snippets that I have of their conversation. Hafsa says to us, I wouldn't know how it's like not to be an American because I haven't lived anywhere else. Now here's a student who was actually born in Ireland and moved to America when she was very little. Her parents' country of origin was Pakistan. So she's brown-skinned, and she ended up going to a high school that was predominantly white and faced discrimination on that high school campus. And it was only in diverse extracurricular groups where she was able to find a space for herself. She remembers the first 2 years of high school praying in hidden hallway corners because she was afraid to ask anyone of what she should do for the afternoon prayer, or struggling on the track cross-country team because how she wore clothes was looked down upon by other people. Her last name was Akbar, As you're aware, oftentimes the phrase Allahu Akbar, which means God is great, is tied to terrorist attacks. So every time the attendance was being taken and her last name was called, students were sniggering at her for this. Another student that we had over here was Amber, and she says something really interesting. She says, I think the fact that I have such light skin and the fact that I don't wear a scarf is what's kept me from ever experiencing outright discrimination. She was Muslim American, but unidentifiable when you just look at her, and she felt that it was due to the lightness of her skin and the fact that she doesn't wear a scarf, that people were not able to identify her as Muslim, that she got away with any kind of outright discrimination. And then we had Selma, who actually went to a Muslim high school, and she said she had very recently started wearing the hijab or the scarf, and she was also light-skinned and could tell the difference between how people perceived her before and after wearing the scarf. She would kind of blend into mainstream norm before she wore the stuff, and stood out like a sore thumb when she did start wearing it. She had instances of people flipping a finger at her and those types of things. But she was very, engaged in the Muslim tradition and really wanted to represent the Muslim tradition well. And then we had Rida, who also went to a Muslim school her entire life and had really interesting feedback to give us, which I think is very representative of a lot of students. She said, the school environment does not expand me as an American person within American culture, basically. It's like a very closed off type of universe. It doesn't feel like we're very connected to the world outside. So that was her feedback to Muslim schools, that she felt that there was an emphasis on developing a Muslim identity, and it was being seen as being antithetical to the American identity that these students hold. And almost like the American culture was being looked down upon, and these students were always being corrected for what this dichotomy seemed to be in the adults around her. So a lot of interesting stories from these 4 participants that I'd be happy to share more with you on the day of our discussion. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Hello everyone, I'm Mohammed Ba-Aoum and my friend Mohammed Alrezq, and we'll be happy to present our research project titled Predicting Student Self-Efficacy in Muslim Societies Using Machine Learning Methods. This is the outline for our presentation. First, we'll give an introduction about the topic, then we'll present the research purpose, research roadmap, experimental data analysis, and we'll explain machine learning methodologies. And after that, we'll present the predictive model results, and we'll conclude with a conclusion and future work. Self-efficacy refers to the belief in someone's ability to perform a particular task or behavior. Research indicates that self-efficacy can enhance student achievement, increase emotional health and well-being, as well as serve as a dependable predictor of motivation and learning. Students with high level of self-efficacy also participate more in class, work harder, persist longer, and have fewer negative emotional reactions when faced with difficulties than students with low self-efficacy. Numerous studies investigated self-efficacy as a potential predictor of academic achievement, student performance, as well as well-being. However, few modeling studies have treated self-efficacy as a primary variable to be predicted. So the aim of this study is to investigate the self-efficacy of students in Muslim societies using machine learning techniques. More specifically, the study intends to predict student self-efficacy utilizing a holistic set of factors, including psychological competencies, problem-solving skill, religious and spirituality, as well as demographic variable, including region and gender. Some implication of this study is the ability to identify students with self-efficacy level to develop self-efficacy improvement intervention for students with low self-efficacy. And now my friend Mohammed will present the research roadmap.
The first step in this study is to obtain the data set. The study used a survey data that was collected by the International Institute of Islamic Thoughts in 2019-22. and for advancing education in Muslim societies. And then the second stage is to do the data wrangling, which is basically we're trying to clean the data and tight it before we proceed with it. Select a participant of interest in the study. We only focus on school students, and also determine the variable of interest related to the characteristics of the selected participants. The third step is to develop some summary descriptive for the variables and the targeted variable. Also check the internal consistency using Cronbach alpha and testing the correlation among the predictors and between the predictors and the targeted variable. And finally, we develop supervised machine learning to predict the student self-efficacy, evaluating model performance, and finally identifying the important variables. This slide basically shows the entire variables that we use in the study. In total, we had 13 variables that include 11 variables that were measured using a different number of items, and 2 categorical variables that include region and gender. This study used a data size of 6,424 school students with the age of less than 18 years. On the lower left side of the slide, we can see the distribution of participants per gender. We can see that female is around 4,000, while the male is around 2,500. On the right side of the slide, we can see the distribution of the participant across 6 regions based on gender. And we can see that South Asia has the highest number of participants, while MENA has the lowest number of participants. And the slide shows the correlation and summary statistics in addition to Cronbach alpha. In terms of the correlation among variables, it seems the correlation between variables and the targeted variables are to be moderate to lower level. And the summary statistics shows that most of the variables tend to be at the lower level based on the Likert scale with a mean of a 3 and more, except CIO and forgiveness, which they had a mean of 2.6 and 2.3 respectively. In terms of the Cronbach alpha, all the constructs had exceeded the lower threshold, which is 0.6, except the gratitude, which it was very close to 0.6. But we kept it in the study to study more factors and understand more about factors related to student self-efficacy. And now Mohammed will continue with machine learning.
Machine learning is a form of artificial intelligence that enables a system to learn from data rather than through explicit programming. It uses a variety of algorithms that iteratively learn from data to improve, describe, and predict outcomes. Machine learning approaches are usually categorized as supervised, unsupervised learning, and deep learning. This study used supervised and deep learning machine learning algorithms to predict student self-efficacy. The algorithm that has been used include 3-tree-based algorithm, decision tree, random forest, as well as extreme gradient boosting, abbreviated as XGBoost. And we used also one deep learning algorithm, which is called neural network, and now we'll briefly describe each one of these algorithms. Decision tree-based machine learning approach perform classification and prediction tasks by building a tree-like structures for deciding the target variable class or value according to certain feature. Each node of a decision tree represents a possible outcome based on the likelihood of the outcome occurring. The simplest form of decision tree-based algorithm is decision tree, which use a single decision tree by fitting training data. Another more complex algorithm is random forest, which create a number of decision tree models at the same time using a simple approach called bagging. And then another also complex approach called XGBoosting, which build multiple decision tree one by one iteratively to enable the model to learn multiple times from the outcome of previous model. A neural network is considered a deep learning approach. In neural networks, data relationship is established through highly interconnected simulated neurons that accept input and then apply weighing coefficients and feed their output to other neurons. which continue the process through the network to eventually predict an outcome. And now my friend Mohammed will present the result of the 4 machine learning predictive model that we developed.
This slide summarizes the result of the 4 predictive models Mohammed just described previously, including decision tree, random forest, XGBoost, and neural network. And it could be clear that the 3 decision tree based model have or tend to have the same agreement in terms of the important variables, including self-regulation, sense of belonging, and problem solving. However, in the study, we also developed neural network to understand more about the factor and self-efficacy using a different algorithm approach. So we can see based on the neural network, the level of importance across all the variables seems to be higher comparing to the decision tree based models. And however, when it comes to data science, we evaluate the different model using different metrics. And in this study, we used a R-square and residual mean square error to evaluate which of the model has the best performance. And based on the model performance, we can see that random forest has the highest R-square with a value of 0.38 and the lowest residual mean square error with a value of 0.32. This study aimed to predict student self-efficacy using machine learning by utilizing a wider set of factors that covered psychological competencies, problem solving, religious and spirituality, and in addition to more demographic variables, including region and gender. 4 machine learning models were developed to examine the important variables, followed by evaluating which of the models is best performed. Based on the result, random forest seems to be outperformed the other models, and 4 variables were most important, including self-regulation, problem solving, and sense of belonging. However, 3 variable that seems to not have any significance, including emotional regulation, gender, and religious and spirituality. Future work for this study could be considered more other factors related to self-efficacy, such as parents' educational levels and mental and psychological health, to get more insight about factors related to self-efficacy and perhaps improve the model performance. With that, thank you very much.
I'll have 15 minutes for Q&A, so if the panelists that have joined online and put on their videos, and we also have one of the panelists in the room, so we'll start and see if anyone in the room has any question for one of our panelists.
Actually, so I have a question for Ahmed and also one for Noor. For Ahmed, I'm wondering what is the context of how peace education is taught in Yemeni universities? Is there a class that's required or not, or is it trying to be spread throughout the curriculum or into like multiple different ways? And how would you recommend, or how do the people we interviewed recommend like it be taught in a way that gets it to as many people as possible, as just being isolated out of a specific class? For Noor, I was really struck by Rita, your last person you quoted, and how she thought that the Islamic schools she went to looked down upon American culture and was sort of isolating her from forming an American identity. And I believe you are or have been a principal of an Islamic school, so I would like to know how you feel an Islamic school could help inculcate both a Muslim identity and an American identity.
Thank you. Gezira, if you want to go first?
Yes.
Okay, we'll start with Ahmed.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. There is no decision in Yemen. I mean, my study is just kind of raising the awareness of the importance of this, because after almost 8 years of war now, we can anticipate that there will be really a post-war transformation where everybody should be ready to contribute. And education is a big piece of, making change in the minds and hearts of the people after those years of war and conflict and misery and stuff. So no peace education yet. Nobody's thinking about peace education in Yemen. So my study hopefully will contribute to raising the awareness. And then the next step is to do building capacity for the teachers and for the educators, starting with the participants to do a workshop for them. And I hope I'll bring some expertise from outside Yemen to help those educators to learn more about how to implement this and how to influence the educational process in the post-war era.
Is there any sort of national curriculum, or is it?
There's nothing in the curriculum mentioned about peace education, so it's a new concept for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Noor, were you able to hear the question for you? Or did you...
I believe I understood the question, but if I didn't, it really would have to do with the audio. I'm guessing that the question is the role that Islamic schools can play in the building of a Muslim American identity. Am I right in understanding that?
Yes, that's right. And then a specific request to reflect on that, your experience as a school leader and how that plays out.
Yeah, sure. So what I'm sharing in the presentation were really the findings of the original dissertation. I went ahead after my original dissertation to publish a book on the same topic. And the work that I've really focused on is counter narratives of Muslim American youth. And what I've also done is I've coined a micro-theoretical framework or a subset under critical race theory to understand and to give us parameters to speak about the Muslim American experience. And I say that is important because I think when there is a gap within academia in terms of the language that exists in speaking about the lived experiences of a particular population, we're invalidating and considering the experiences of that population to be irrelevant to the mainstream. So I think the first takeaway from the work that I've done theoretically was heavily situated in the importance of counter narratives. And I think as a principal of a Muslim school, where I repeatedly see this pattern of students carrying the invisible guilt and burden of 9/11, even though they're born after it, what I've done to offset that is really begin with the counter narratives within the school setting as well, and to make sure that social justice is really an important piece of the kind of education that we're providing them in this school. The other thing I think that's really important for Muslim schools to consider is it's very important for us to be intentional about not isolating the students. We want to provide the students with a protective environment and an environment that is very much like an affinity school. But at the same time, it's really important for us to be teaching our students how to be part of a larger community. And that is done in both ways. Our students need to, for example, be able to identify what microaggressions and discrimination looks like. These are not things that we should be not talking about or pretending they don't exist. I think it's really important for students to be given that tool. The other thing is provide them with a lot of community engagement opportunities so that they see themselves as a part of the community and that this is not an alienating experience for them. And then the other thing I think that's really important also is to engage our students in the development of counter narratives, to really give them the importance that their story has and the ability to share it and to showcase it.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions in the room?
Yes, hi. Thank you all for very insightful presentations. I have a question for the team from Sudan, Dr. Safia. You described your research and the analysis of the IIIT mapping the terrain data as it pertains to Sudan. And I was wondering whether you think the results of your study have implications for Sudan, especially under the current situation with some conflict, unrest, and political conflicts in Sudan. Do you think that the results of your studies reflect any reality or has implications for the current situation in Sudan? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for this chance. I am so happy to participate with my colleague, Dr. Rihab, in these important sessions and satisfied much. Concerning your question about the political conflict of Sudan, the study states that in spite of the fact that Sudan is almost Muslim countries and there are so common cultures in the Sudan. In spite of this fact, still the Sudan, like other Muslim countries, suffer from political conflict. This may attribute it to the common culture which need a transformative education in order to overcome the negative aspects of our culture. And we hope that our results and recommendations can overcome these problems. Thank you for this. Moreover, we need another surveys that can put into consideration our cultural diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other? Okay, we have two.
Thank you. I have one comment and one question, one little, one big. Dr. Noor, I just wanted to say thank you for the way that you started your presentation with your personal, professional, and educational story. It really opened up the space for us, and I felt like it was really beautiful. So thank you. Ahmed, do you have any high-level results for us? Can you tell us anything about the very most basic results and implications for that?
Yes, so let me just explain to you my misunderstanding when I was approached the first time about the symposium about having in-person attendance and online attendance. So my old understanding, I'm very old now, that in-person will come and they will present the PowerPoint and then they will talk and distribute whatever. But then I understood that this is a new system, which I expect. And I agree, it's good, it's very effective because it saves time. So I prepared the findings here. If you want to share with me, and that's maybe answering the question. Very brief. Very brief. I found that there are different views. And most of them, they are in agreement actually among all those participants about peace education. They all emphasize the need for peace education to solidify peace, establish peace first and solidify peace, and make the country more stable by preparing the young generations for the post-war transformation. And many of them, they expressed the problems that they are faced with because of the war. Like, for example, schools are being used as centers for internally displaced people. Many of the schools are closed. Salaries not being paid for those teachers for a long time. And this is common on all those four universities. Because some of the universities, one in the south, they're supposed to be in a better shape because they are under the control of the internationally recognized government. But still, they are in a bad shape as well. So I was really amazed to see the same concern being repeated in the interviews among all educators who are being interviewed. This is the first question about their concepts about peace. I'm going to read all it's here. The second question is about what they can do to support peace, what teachers can do. So they are all aware of their role in the society. But they feel that they are helpless because, the situation is not helping them to really to participate and share. There is no space for them to be part of. And some of them, I don't look at it here in this finding, but some of them were fearing about their lives if they say something about peace or to be aligned with political force than others. So it's like a sensitivity situation that's prevailing there amongst many of the interviewed, and they try to avoid mentioning anything to do with who's in charge and who's to be blamed and how we can go out of this mess. But they are aware of their role. They say that we try to educate students even if the war is still continuing. If it's dangerous for us to go and report our work in school, but still we are doing it. We are still doing it because we see a value in doing that, and we are doing it despite the fact that we are not receiving our salaries from the government, which is really very strange situation if you look at it from outside. The third question is about training and curriculum. They all agree in having a curriculum of peace so that people will understand tolerance, accepting others. Even within Islam as a religion, we would like to do work to accept each other, even if we are Shia or Sunnis, that kind of schools that are prevailing in Muslim wars. But when it comes to confronting people and having a fight on the wall based on their religious differences, that becomes really very scary situation. So they are aware of that. They want to have this approach to bring everybody on the same platform and not to have this kind of confrontations in the individual levels when it comes to the post-war transformation. They're talking about changing the curriculum, updating it. They're talking about organizing workshops, campaigns to bring students back to school, because many of the students they dropped school because of the security, and many of the students they joined the fighters in the war that become children soldiers, and this adds more insult to the wound at all. So yeah, so I try to summarize some of these findings that I found in the interviews, and the purpose is to have second phase of brainstorming, really concrete terms how the educators can do their job in the post-war transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we have time for one more question from the room.
Hello, thank you all for your presentations. I have a question for Urbancic. Awesome. Okay. Then I move on to the question to Noor. Thank you all for your presentation. I'm just want to know more about the population that you work with, because I did a similar study, but I didn't delve into more details. So what are the differences you found, like in terms of Muslim students belonging to different backgrounds? For instance, you use their identity as a Muslim, but how this play, like when it comes, for instance, to race, like let's say African American Muslim, for instance, Arabs, white who are converts, and also students from families with different socioeconomic class. And also, like, what strategies do these students use? I'm just wondering, like, to cope with these experiences of microaggression and being pictured as the other.
Thank you. Were you able to hear that, Noor?
Unfortunately, I couldn't. Could someone repeat that for me, please?
Sure, I'll try to repeat it. Hopefully it's not too loud. So the question was, if you could talk more about the variance within the student groups that you work with, so on dimensions of race, socioeconomic class, and other factors that might have influenced their experience, and then how, as an instructor, kind of managing their, like you said, talked about, understanding and dealing with microaggressions, how your strategies might have differed based on those differences. That's right? Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So there's two ways to look at that. One of them is for my research. The research was for the book and for the dissertation before that. that research was centered around people who self-identified as Muslim American women. So, you know, if they self-identified as Muslim American women and they were over 18, that was the criteria. There was no constraint around what racial or ethnic demographic they were coming from, as long as they were identifying themselves as Muslim American women. And when I did my dissertation, my participants happened to all be women. But for the book, I was mindful that I wanted to kind of do a gender-centric study because I'd done part of the work before that. I mean, the racial backgrounds were all over the place. There really wasn't a pattern to see over there in terms of who came forward for the study. In terms of the population at the school, the students that we have at the school, 99% of the students are students who come from Muslim families, where at least one parent is Muslim. Again, the racial demographic is very varied. There aren't it's not like just an Arabic speaking parent population. It's very mixed. So in terms of what I think is important, the implications that race or other intersectionalities might have on the experiences of Muslim American students, I've done a lot of work on that when I developed my theoretical framework, Muskrit. And one of the points that I make over there is identifiability is one of the most important things when it comes to the experience of a Muslim American experience. So if the person is identifiable visibly as being Muslim, their experience is going to be starkly different from one who is not easily identifiable as Muslim. And then the other piece that I also speak about in Muskrit is the implication that gender identification has to the Muslim American experience, like how are Muslim men perceived as opposed to how are Muslim women perceived. And I think the audience will pretty much have an understanding of that. Muslim women are generally perceived to be oppressed, and Muslim men are generally perceived to be oppressive. So in terms of that, I think identifiability is key in terms of the experience that people have. And my research, suggested that those Muslim American women who were identifiable, their experiences were very different from those who were not. So much so that those who were not identifiable knew to say, we know that we have not faced discrimination because nobody can tell that we're Muslim. And people who had not been identifiable and then became identifiable, for example, like if they were wearing the hijab later, knew how to, deconstruct their experience and how that identifiability had severely shaped it. So I think it's identifiability and gender, those intersectionalities really play a very key role into perception and then the experiences that students have.
Okay, yeah. So Mohammed and Mohammed, thank you for your presentation. One question that I had that's kind of pointing to your methodological skills is this is a different perspective, right? Offering this machine learning approach to these very holistic, humanistic skills. And throughout our talking, you've mentioned, how this seems to be a field that has not really been explored by your area of expertise, right, in machine learning. So I was wondering if you could share more about what it was like coming into this perspective that is often thought of as a qualitative field with your quantitative skills.
Thank you, Alex, for your question. I think it's from both perspectives, even from educational perspective. When we're reading the literature, self-efficacy hasn't been emphasized as a variable, as a response. Most of the research use self-efficacy in educational research to predict or to associate it with advancement in academic. So this is one thing. And even the research that has been looking at self-efficacy as a predicted variable, mostly they look at from a narrow perspective, in classroom or just result of tests international test. But what was interesting in this survey, I think the holistic approach to look at self-efficacy. This is so from educational perspective. And then from modeling and from quantitative approach, I think we have an interest to make modeling and quantitative research more relevant. Sometimes it is just mainly used into private sector or marketing or profit-driven research, but introducing the quantitative approach into education and into value-based, I think, area of research, it makes it more interesting, I think, for students and even for researchers, and could open new potential for application and also advancement in education and even in other fields.
Great, thank you so much. And I think with that, we will wrap up the second panel of the day, and I'll hand over the mic to our conference organizers.
Well, Mom and I are sitting here together, so we can come on. And thank you all so much for a wonderful symposium, starting on Friday night with wonderful panels yesterday, and closing with two fantastic panels today. So we look forward to seeing many of these papers, hopefully in print, in the Journal of Education and Muslim Societies. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, Elizabeth Worden, Ilham Nasser. You have all of our email addresses from the many emails you received from us. And also don't forget to complete the evaluation. We would appreciate your feedback. And I think that's everything. Ilham?
Oh, I just want to thank our team here for all the hard work. Danielle and Ashley and Selma and I hope I didn't miss anyone. And thank you all for your patience with the technology and with the setup. I hope you have some feedback for us. It will be very helpful to receive your short evaluations if possible to reiterate them. Thank you.
And expect an email to follow up.
And expect an email from Ms. Huda in the back regarding how to proceed to develop your presentations into manuscripts for GEMS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all again. Wonderful week, rest of the weekend. Oh, and for those of you who missed lunch.